Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and once again you're seeing me in a rather darkened room, although the sun is coming up. It's really, really pretty out there. Good morning, Pat. And good morning, Alex. And yeah, I'm just admiring this sunrise with the poison ivy is not my friend. However, the poison ivy outside is now kind of turning a nice golden color. So good morning, Sam. So we've got this this beautiful, it's just this beautiful vision of like golden and red leaves, and then like you've got this like violet and pink and purple like sunrise in the background. So yeah, this is why I don't turn lights on if I can help it. And good morning, Jenny. So I'm just admiring this sunrise, and yes, as anybody who's been watching these lately knows, this will get brighter as as the live stream progresses. But as long as you can see me, because some mornings, like on certain winter mornings when I've been on, I don't know, Zoom calls with England and stuff at like around this time, it would be like the room, it was like literally you turn the camera on and it's pitch black. So, good morning, Suda. So, yeah, so here we are. It's the 2nd of October, and, I have the sniffles now. Excuse me a moment. Okay, so today is a big day in a lot of ways, because for one, it is the solar eclipse that we've talked about. Good morning, and everyone else. Is that why the picture is dark? I thought it was my PC. Nope, it's dark, and the last few of them have been dark in the morning. I did have a candle on yesterday morning, and it kind of had the spooky flicker effect, but that is why. So as I said, it'll get lighter as the light increases. So what was I saying? Yeah, okay, so today's the day of the solar eclipse. Now, exactly what time that's happening, or if it has happened already, because it was a partial eclipse, I'm not sure. But I do know it's today. Its main effects are going to be, we're going to see starting, I feel like the effects may have started even before today, but today is certainly the day that is officially happening. And I think it's only visible from the southern hemisphere. So I think like around like Chile and places like that in South America are the ones that can actually see it this time. So, because I don't see a whole lot being made of it in the temples and things up here. So I think it's because it's not something that's visible here. And usually they will close the temple during the hours of the eclipse. They won't have anything going on. But it's quite possible it happened at hours. Yes, they did. So, okay, yes, they did. Do you mean the eclipse already happened? Is that what you're saying, Jen? Because if it did, because I think it may have already happened. And I certainly got the impression it happened last night, because last night was freaking weird. I just, like, I don't even know how to describe, because it's one thing to have dreams, right? I mean, we all have weird dreams at time to time, right? I tend to experience solar eclipse 2:49 p.m. EDT 10:4 Libra. No, just the energies. Oh, okay, got it. Solar eclipse 2:49 p.m. Okay, so it hasn't happened yet. It's going to be happening. What will be close to 3 o'clock this afternoon. So interesting. We're just certainly building towards it then. So but I don't know. Last night was still very, very weird. I tend to have two different things that happen. If I either have dreams, sometimes I hear things like when I talk about channeling and such, it's more like, I was thinking about that this morning. I said, there's different ways I think that people channel. I mean, I know people who seem to have like full body possession, full on channeling, like mediums who do things like that. For me, the way it's always been, and again, I'm not talking like I'm, as much of an expert medium as some people are, but it's like they sit on the back, and I can feel it on the back of my neck, the back of my head, it's on the top of my head too, and it's almost like I've got somebody sitting on the top of my back. So it's an interesting kind of feeling, and it doesn't matter whether that's Azrael, it doesn't matter if that's the Morrigan, that's the way it feels. And occasionally I will feel other closer sensations. But good morning, Melissa. So last night was just but the other types of visions I have is like when I close my eyes, and I'm very much awake, I know, because I got woken up last night by, the mice. It's getting cold again, so the mice, of course, are finding their way into the walls, which means, I'm I often pray to Ganesha to say, can you get them out of my house? I mean, I really don't. I don't necessarily want to hurt mice, but there's also no people who say, oh, just trap and release them. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. You trap them and they're stupid. They turn around, they come right back in your house. I knew this when I had cats. They would just turn around, they come right back, and and eventually they'd end up dead because they just don't have any common sense. They're just like, oh, but I want to go back there. So, so I ended up putting traps out for them, unfortunately. Not the ones that snap their necks, but there are other traps that I have. And I don't like it, but I got to a point where I'm like, I just can't, I need to put something out that's going to be discouraging to the mice to come into my house, because the only other option, get a cat. Well, if I was planning on the thing about the cat is, if I'm not planning on staying in the USA, and having a cat would be a huge barrier to moving. So, when I had cats, it was different. Although cats are not a guarantee either. The last cat I had, he was like, there could be a mouse on the floor and you'd point right at the mouse. He'd be standing there eating out of his food bowl. And I'm like, there's a mouse right there. And he wouldn't look at the mouse. He'd look at my finger. And I'm like, look, mouse. And he's like, it was like, and then later on he'd walk around kind of like sniffing around, like looking at me like, I think there might have been a mouse here. And I'm like, So anyway, they're not a guarantee, but they often are a deterrent. You are correct. And I used to have cats that lived in my basement. When I first moved into this house, I had a cat that they called Janis Joplin, who used to lived in the basement. And when the people moved, they weren't sure what they were going to do because they were moving onto a busy road, and she liked to go outside. I said, you can leave her here if you want. And at first they took her, and then they said, no, she's really unhappy in the new house. Can you keep her? So, because she loved my basement, absolutely loved my basement. And she was a polydactyl, so she had like thumbs. And she was the sweetest cat in the world, and she was also incredibly vicious to outside wildlife. She would bring things back and like leave them in front of the furnace downstairs. I'm like, okay. And they'd be left dissected. I was like, okay, don't do this. This is not necessary. But she was, when I had her, 6 toes, yes. She had 6 toes. She had, and she was almost like she had thumbs. She had like these big chunky paws, and she was, but she was a little killing machine. And finally, I'd find things on my front porch, and I was like, okay, it's okay. It's not necessary for you to do this. After a while, she did stop doing it, but she liked her little, cozy little bed downstairs on the I had a workbench down there at the time. And then eventually the neighbor's cat, who I ended up adopting, lived down there for a while as well, after the cat was injured. And, they just kind of looked at each other. I mean, they weren't, like, friendly, but they didn't, like, bother each other either. They were just kind of like, oh, sup, like, they didn't really interact. But anyway, yeah. So that would be an effective thing. The only other thing I could do is try to fill in, they say, try to fill in all the holes around your foundation, which is laughable. I have a house from the 1850s, and it's like, yeah, good luck with that. Anyway, not to derail too much into that. So the other big thing happening today, obviously, is that the school is opening today. So the ISFM opens this evening, 6:30 p.m. EST or EDT, whatever you want to call it. And I got more questions. I had more questions from Australia yesterday about whether or not people, because I had a patron who's taking who's eligible to audit two of the lecture seminar combinations. And somebody said to me, look, is there any way I can, what would be the cost to do the third? But see, this person, because they're in Australia, they're not going to be able to participate. They're only going to be able to watch it. And I know there's other people too. I know, Sam, you've asked questions about it before and things. So I thought, okay, what I think I'm going to set up today is a recording option. So if people just want to get a recording just of the lecture, I'm just going to make like a flat 65 for that, for a recording of the lecture. And then it doesn't include the seminar, but it does have, but then that way you're getting that whole 2-hour class. And again, all of these are private and they're going to be password protected, but they are, but yeah, that will be something that I can share with people. And, I'm trying to think of, I'm figuring out exactly the best way to do that. And today's the day I do have to sit on the phone with Wix help. Yesterday was a day off where I went, I think I posted a few pictures to the Katonia podcast page. I went pumpkin picking. I got my pumpkin. I got my sister and I picked apples. And of course I had to get the obligatory cider and cider donuts and all that fun stuff. So I did that today. I did that yesterday, and it was just a really beautiful day yesterday. I know it's not, the remnants of this hurricane are not quite out, but it still was really beautiful out. It'll be even more beautiful over the weekend, so a lot to look forward to. But anyway, the classes start tonight, yeah. So again, if there was still, so what I will do is I will put up an option today, and I'll advertise about it on Insta and everything, and on Facebook, about the fact that if people just want the recordings of the lectures, that there can be that. Because some people, that's all they want. They're like, I just want to be able to hear what this person has to say. If you want to participate, that's the thing. In order to participate fully, you have to show up for it, because it's hard to participate remotely. It's not set up like I have had classes in the past that have been set up like a remote learning, like a fully online type of a thing, like I do for my students at Montclair, where there's a recorded video and you just watch it, and then you've got questions and responses and things like that. But this one is actually live, because I want it to be more interactive. And, again, since I've had so many requests, excuse me, I don't want to say, oh, okay, people who just totally, for reasons that are out of their control, aren't able to want to attend things but can't. I want to make sure, I'm trying to figure out what that option could be. So anyway, I'll be posting that today. So let me have a sip of coffee here. Right, okay, so we have a ghost story a day. Right, so I don't know if you've all been waiting with bated breath for that. For today's story, yesterday's, of course, was a fictional story, and it was kind of a fun one. And I was trying to think about what story I was going to tell today. And I decided I was going to go with a true story. It's not going to be a super long one, but it's a true one. And it is not one that happened to me, but it is something that happened to somebody in my family. And so I'm going to... this is going to be more of it's just kind of an interesting story than anything else. I'm probably going to do a mixture of those, mixtures of the real life stories with maybe folk tales and things like that. So, okay, so this real life story. I have a family member who is in law enforcement, and they are in law enforcement in a major U.S. city. And I'm going to keep it vague like that deliberately, just because this is a public video and everything. People who know me, people who have been friends with me or come to my house and know about my family and probably know who this is, but in any case. So this person had come out to visit, had visited with my mother and with myself. It was during the winter one year, and it's probably been a long time ago now. I want to say it's probably been at least 10 years that they told me this story. But, because they were still active working on the street. They were, in the patrol car kind of a thing. Whereas later on, now that I think they're mainly do teaching and that kind of stuff. So, so what happened was there was a midnight type of patrol, and they got a call that an alarm had gone off at this. It was like a deli or something. It was where they had gone, and so they went there. The alarm was going off. Of course, they call the owner, because the owner has to come and turn the alarm off. And they're able to get in through the back door. Okay, and so of course they have guns drawn. They go in, and they're looking around the place. They're covering each other, checking the place out. You announce yourself as police. That you're there. And my family member notices that there is a monitor with a camera on it, and he thought, oh, okay, the guy's got a security camera. We can check this out. So he goes over, and there's this really kind of an old-fashioned one. It's got a VHS tape with it. But he turns the thing on, and the thing's on. He hits play, and sure enough, there is this video recording of this individual who's broken in, and he's like, great, this is fantastic. He's like, we're gonna get this guy. We've got video. Case closed, case solved. It's gonna be great. So he watches the video, watches the guy on the video, and then decides to go rewind the tape so that him and his partner can look at it again. They're both seeing this. And then goes to rewind the tape, and it's not rewinding. And he's like, what the heck, you know? Like, he's like, tell me there's something wrong with this thing, you know? So eventually he hits the eject button. And when he looks in there, he realizes there's no tape in there. And he's just like, okay, you know, and then so the owner finally comes, has shut the alarm off, and they're talking to him. And they said, your security system, you know, does that work, you know? And he was like, oh no, that's just there for looks. That hasn't worked in years. Okay. And I remember my family member and his partner kind of looked at each other and were like, I don't think this is going into the police report, because they saw, there was an image, basically they were shown, of the person who had broken in to the place, but it's a phantom image. There was no, they have no explanation. And frequently, if you hear any kind of stories from law enforcement, they're not going to, you know, when weird stuff happens on a call, they're not going to put it into the police report, because they'll just get laughed out, you know, or or it will make them somehow look bad to the office, because of course such things don't, you know, they just deal in facts and objectivity, right? So when something anomalous happens, it's extraordinarily rare that they report it. So yeah, the other interesting story, I'll just tell you one other quick one that this family member had told me, was that they used to work in a jail. That's part of what they would do, is they would work in the city county jail as part of their usually when they're new cops, that's what they would do. And he was talking to a girl who was in the jail, who had she'd been picked up on some kind of drug charge, and I don't know if it was like, I can't remember if it was meth or if it was something. In any case, she was somebody who had to go to medical and everything, because she had been unconscious, and then when she came to, oh my God, I'm sorry. This has got to be annoying to people listening to this. She says, she comes out and she says, she tells him that that it was like she was dead and she was walking around in this field. It was like a field of wheat. And it was just very sunny, and the wind was blowing. And she says, I don't know, I was just walking endlessly through this field. And and she somehow knew she was in some other kind of a place, but she had that was the way she had experienced it, as just walking through these fields. And I've heard things like that before, people who've kind of had experiences that are like of the NDE type, where they are in this place where it's just very sunny, and there's a lot of fields. And I can't help thinking of, you know, old images of archaic ideas about Hades and about fields of asphodel and things like that. I can't help having that come to my mind when I hear things like that. Now, for the record, my family member is a total atheist as well, and not somebody who's a believer in the paranormal. Probably thinks most of it is made up, but by the same token is somebody who's had enough experiences that they're kind of like, you know. And of course, the person that they tell them to is me, because why not? Of course you're going to tell me, because who else would you tell, right? So anyway, just a couple of anecdotes from from the law enforcement side of things in terms of ghost stories. So I don't know if that was probably not as fun as the one yesterday, but certainly it was an interesting one. So I'll see what I'm gonna end up picking for tomorrow. Yeah, so anyway, that's our little foray into the supernatural for the day. Okay, so as far as the topic that I was going to talk about today, I have the, what was it? Yeah, I always try to pull some cards to see what's the vibe of the day, what's the thing we want to talk about. And this morning, no matter which deck I used, the thing I got was creativity. Okay, now mind you, we've had conversations about creativity before, okay? So what I don't want is to come on and be repetitive and talk about the same thing over and over again. But for some reason, this came up like a number of different ways and a number of different times. And the main card coming up with this was the Empress. Okay, and this is the Osho Zen Empress, which is, do I have her on the top here? Or did I nice, neatly, and effectively shuffle the cards again after I was done, which is sometimes a habit that I have. Now here she is. This is the Empress. It's the creativity card. Okay. And it's interesting, though, that she's holding up and there's like this eclipse going on up in the corner here. And yeah, because it's almost like, yeah, so it's very interesting. We have this, this creativity card and with this image of an eclipse on it. So it's making me think, about the creative energy of this eclipse, apparently, because eclipses, okay, they're things that that awaken things, that bring things. Good morning, that bring things, to light. Okay, and it's. So we often will have the things that have been hidden from us, things that have been just on the periphery, things where we're sure that there's something, but we don't fully know what it is. Like eclipses tend to reveal that to us, and sometimes it's very shocking, which is why a lot of times it's associated with this energy of breakthrough or the kind of tower thunderbolt type of energy. But I think there seems to be this push towards, no, see what you can create out of this energy. That seems to be what the message is. Like where can we be creative with this? Now what I did do, just because this came up like several times with the Osho Zen, was I got the Osho Zen book again. And let me tell you what it says about creativity here. Because I think that might be, because this takes a slightly different angle on things, I think that might help elucidate things. Okay. From the alchemy of fire and water below to the divine light entering from above, the figure in this card is literally possessed by the creative force. Really, the experience of creativity is an entry into the mysterious. Technique, expertise, and knowledge are just tools. The key is to abandon oneself to the energy that fuels the birth of all things. The energy has no form or structure, yet all form and structure comes out of it. It makes no difference what particular form your creativity takes. It can be painting or singing, planting a garden, or making a meal. The important thing is to be open to what wants to be expressed through you. Remember that we don't possess our creations. They do not belong to us. True creativity arises from a union with the divine, with the mystical, and the unknowable. Then it is both a joy for the creator and a blessing to others. Okay? So, interesting. So this is the idea of creativity as something, well, maybe this is not weird or unusual. Creativity is something that wants to be expressed. Okay? So we are talking about this idea of expression. And I'll read to you what the other side says as well. As you can see, my book is falling apart. Creativity is the quality you bring to the activity that you are doing. It is an attitude and inner approach, how you look at things. Not everybody can be a painter, and there's no need also. If everybody is a painter, the world will be very ugly, it will be very difficult to live, and not everybody can be a dancer, and there is no need. But everyone can be creative. Whatsoever you do it, if you do it joyfully, if you do it lovingly, if your act of doing is not purely economical, then it is creative. Okay, so there's our definition. And it gets back to what we've been talking about you can create things just to create them, not just because, oh, well, is this good enough to make money at? That's not really the point. Let's see. If you have something growing out of it within you, if it gives you growth, it is spiritual, it is creative, and it is divine. You become more divine as you become more creative. All the religions of the world have said God is the creator. I don't know whether he's the creator or not, but one thing I know, the more creative you become, the more godly you become. When your creativity comes to a climax, when your whole life becomes creative, you live in God. So he must be the creator because people who have been creative have been closest to him. Love what you do, be meditative while you are doing it, whatsoever it is. Okay, so that is the essence of the creativity card here. And so Okay, so yeah, so that just gets to the idea that it comes back to the idea of mind as well. The way in which a lot of times we think we have to try to be creative. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to and we think very much about how, well, am I, about technique. We start thinking about certain things. And the thing is, when one is being creative, and perhaps this is coming up because we not only in the context of the eclipse, but of the school opening today, because that's certainly creativity is going to be part of it for the people who are on for the full ride. It's about how do we create, how do we do new things here, how do we manage to it's an expression of who we are, but it's an expression that comes from source. And it's something that happens, it's almost like creativity is something that happens to us, not something exactly that we do. Because when we try very, very hard, when we sit down and think, about all these different rules that we have to follow when we do something, rather than letting it kind of flow naturally, then it becomes harder. Then we find we're very critical of what we're doing, or it just doesn't come out the way we want, because we're trying to let the mind take control of what it is that we're doing, whatever it is. Now it's not that you can't do certain things. So for example, if you use the example of making a meal, if you follow a recipe, okay, you can follow a recipe to the letter, okay, and then you can make something. You could be successful with that. But you find after a while, if cooking is the way in which you are creative, then you don't need a recipe. You just do things and you're like, little of this, little of that. Like, you kind of know how to you just have a feel for how to put things together. And eventually it becomes a natural thing. If you're painting, there's all kinds of things that can happen. There's certain ground rules, there's things with perspective and stuff that oftentimes are discussed in the way that one might paint or that one might draw. And then there's also with writing. Now, writing is probably the one that I know the best. I've known a lot of people in the past who, when they go into write, I actually had a friend in England who was writing a detective novel. Was a former colleague of mine, writing a detective novel. And he had sent me the first chapter. I just wrote about how to shift left brain thinking into right brain thinking into mundane daily tasks. Yeah, and that's kind of it too. If we want to think left brain is certainly more logical, right brain is more creative. And actually, incidentally, interesting you brought that up, Sam, because you know how we often say that the left side is feminine and the right side is masculine. Now, what I was taught in Rouhani was that when that energy comes to the neck, when it comes to this point, it's almost like makes like almost a helix type thing. It shifts, it like turns. And so then when it comes out through the head, then the right side becomes feminine and the left side becomes masculine. I remember saying that and I was like, okay, because I often wondered why it's right brain, left brain, and yet left brain activity is more in line with what we would think of as the right side of the body. So it's interesting. Yeah, flipping things, getting to things from for mundane daily tasks. Wow, okay. So noted. Thank you. Yeah, that was something I had learned from Neshla in the Rouhani class. She had mentioned that. And so that's interesting. And that is kind of what we're doing. Like, how do you shift into creative mode? Because a lot of us are not, I don't know. It's not that we're not creative, but we are, I think even if we have kind of a natural right brain inclination, you'll find people with a natural, what we're going to call, if we're going to use left and right brain. Okay, I'm going to use that way of thinking about it, which, I've heard people say, oh, well, that's not really a thing. Well, whatever. I mean, we understand energetically that that's how it works. And energetically, when we talk about things that are right brain, that's the creative side. But we're often trying to take a very left brain approach to the right side. And again, it's understood that there's certain rules. Like I was just talking about my friend, colleague, who was writing this detective novel. I'd written the first chapter, or first couple of chapters, and sent it to me and said, oh, well, we were kind of sharing what our writing. And he was teaching creative writing, actually, at a school in the UK. And I said, tell me what you think about this. And it was a good story. I mean, it was definitely a good start. He had some really good character development. But it was kind of be like a police kind of a thing. He says, oh, well, I have to get all the details about police right before I can move on with this story. I can't get to the next chapters until I have all of that exactly right. And I said to him, you're not going to get anywhere if you do that. You can't just sit there and fuss over, oh, is this exactly right? I've written courtroom things, okay? Like I've envisioned it, and I've written stories. And I'm like, yeah, there's probably stuff about courtroom procedure that I don't have right in this. And right now, I don't care. It's not, when you're creating something, that's not the part where you're going to start running around and fussing about structure. If you're writing poetry, if you're saying, okay, if you're aiming to write, sometimes people do poetic exercises like, oh, I'm going to write a villanelle, or I'm going to write a sonnet, or I'm going to write, some particular form. You basically, you start with something. You always start with like a draft. You start with something. You see what comes out first, and then you can play. It's like almost like the pieces of the puzzle are coming out, and now you're going to fit them together in the way that they make sense for what it is that you're doing. From a perspective of dealing with writing, to me, I'm always thinking, okay. I mean, again, you do have to think about the form. Like if you're writing poetry, I'm always thinking, okay, how can I say? I know what I want to say. I might write a whole bunch of words, and then I might be like, okay, how can I pare this down to just the right words? So in other words, there's always revision involved. Occasionally, you do hear about these cases where people will write a song or will do a thing, and boom, they'll just like do it. It'll just come out 5 minutes later, and boom, they've got like, I don't know, they've got this great song or this great, they have this great piece of writing. Yes, creativity comes in action, is what Pat's saying here. Yes, and creativity does come in action. And I think also it's something that, but at the same time, there's something passive about it, because that's the feminine side, because it's something you have to just allow to flow through you. I think the part where we, try to make it into something more that fits a certain type of form comes later. If we think about tarot, if we think about the Fool card, and then the Magician card, and then the High Priestess card, the way that they fall in order, it's almost like, okay, the Fool is just kind of like the whatever, whatever the idea is. The Magician is about making something manifest, but the High Priestess has to do with that which is kind of not necessarily in form. Okay, and then when we get to the Emperor and the Empress, now we're talking about creativity in terms of a form. Oh, thank you. Oh, sure. No, but you're right. But actually, I mean, but you do have a point there, Pat. I mean, Pat, no, that is a good point, because if you don't do anything with it, if it just floats around in your head, then it's just something floating around theoretically in your head, right? You're thinking it, but you don't do anything with it, then yeah, and you need action to make something happen. I mean, that is definitely the truth. But it's kind of like, but there's also a passivity to it, because you have to allow it to happen. You don't want to stop it. And, like if you're writing a story, you don't want to go, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. I don't think a person would do that. Like if you keep doing, like if you're writing a story like that, it's going to be, in the end, you're going to have a very awkward story, because you're not allowing it to just come out the way it's come out. If things come out in a story that you think people might be triggered by, or you think that might be too, like I write some things that I think might be some triggery for some people, but I'm like, I just have to write it like I write it. I'm just writing it. Initially, I'm not writing it to publish. That shouldn't be my first consideration, or if it is, then I might have to look at that later on. And I publish a lot of my own stuff. So, I just figure, if I want to, there's other pieces that I write, I could spend hours on them, and it's like, okay, this is just for me. And it's not, again, a lot of it depends on what you're going to do with it. Sometimes just the idea is enough. Sometimes we have a creative idea. I used to have in grad school, I would have notebooks full of things that I would start writing, and it would just be like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. But sometimes you go back over those ideas, and then all of a sudden those ideas, it's like the seed that didn't germinate this time, but now it did, So, how it is, you plant stuff one year, and then one year only a couple of them come up, and then the next year everything comes up, that kind of an energy. It's like a seed that you plant. Creativity is like that seed. And it's kind of, and we know that when things grow, they kind of grow by kind of the power of nature, whatever that power is. And creative ideas aren't really any different from that. Things that they kind of grow out of us. And and everybody creates. Everybody creates, and that doesn't mean everybody, like the card says, is an expert, I don't know, musician, dancer, writer, whatever. I mean, it doesn't, one does not have to be. And yeah, this is interesting. I'm thinking about also, this is making me think about the live stream I did with Joanna Madlock. If you haven't seen that one, that is on the Katonia channel, when we talk about creativity and the creative process, and that's what she says. She says, not everything we create is always interesting to other people. Maybe it's just interesting to us. Like she was giving the idea of vacation photos because she's a photographer. She goes, yeah, you take pictures and, people look at them and they're just kind of like, yeah, okay. While you think they're awesome, right? So sometimes you do things. I've written stuff that I think is just incredible. And I'll have other people read it and they'll go, oh, I don't know. It's not really my thing. And again, it's just, so I think audience is not, I think we also don't want to be, it's very difficult because when you try to sell something in the public sphere, I'm also helping somebody with the editing of their novel right now. And when she puts it out there, she says, I want it to be worth something. I want people to buy it. I want it to be like a big seller. I want to get the message out of this book. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, but you don't want to write it with the intention of that. That shouldn't be the reason you're writing it is because you want it to be a bestseller. Like that never works. You just have to let it be what it is, and you have to let people find it. A lot of times when we put a lot of work into something, we want to see some kind of reward or that comes back for it. But the reward doesn't always come in the way that we expect. Okay, I'm pulling our reading for today. Our center card is Adventure again. Page of Pentacles comes up a lot. So creating to be not for an outcome. Yeah, it's more about the journey than the destination when you create. It's a matter of seeing where it goes. And in the end, when you have created something, then the decision comes at that point as to where it's going to go or what you're going to do with it. Like I said, I've written 5 novels. I'm not a best-selling author. There's certain people who buy my books, certain people who are interested in the material, and then there's others I know who are just not going to be interested or just not going to get it. And again, how do I publish my books? I don't even bother with an agent because literary agents are looking at it and going, is this going to sell? That's the problem with going through agents. And you got to remember, like with books, there's only like 3 major publishers out there. I think Random House has bought up almost everything. And I think even like Penguin and Simon & Schuster and all of them, they bought up a lot of the major houses. There's like maybe 2 or 3 left. And that's the problem. You can't, they're only interested in what sells. And then let's just say you do get a contract with them, because I do know people who have had contracts with them. They might give you an advance. Okay, so you could make some money that way. Then otherwise, they leave you on your own. It's like they don't market it, they don't do anything unless it's something attached to a celebrity or something like that. Like your book doesn't usually get any marketing or any kind of a push. You have to do it on your own. And a lot of people are very frustrated like that by that. They've gone through the whole process of creating, and now they have to sell it too. Like you're working with a major publisher, but they're not willing to sell it for you. So it's a very, very hard road when you're doing something as a source of income, because not only do you have to be on top of it in terms of creating, but you also have to be on top of it in terms of marketing it and getting out there. What I found with my books is that when I'm reading from them every day and plugging them every day, that more people buy them. But because I have so much other stuff going on, when I stop doing that, sales fall off because it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And I'm also well aware that not everybody's going to want to read these books. I almost feel like certain people are meant to read these books, and other people, maybe it's not where they're at. So I'm not real pushy about it. Like everybody has to read my book. So yeah. So it's an interesting thing when you start getting to the end product and what happens with the end product. I think all of us would like to be able to, like I was talking about Washington Irving when I was up in Sleepy Hollow. Like, wow, wouldn't it be great to be able to write books for a living, have a publisher that's going to provide you with an income? Well, isn't that nice? But it doesn't happen anymore. And so that's something, so creativity, now having said all of that, I do feel like we are moving into a world, in spite of how things appear with AI and everything, where creativity is going to be valued more, and where people who do art, people who make things of certain types, are going to be front and center again. Like that's going to be something that's considered to have value, and not just certain people with certain connections. Because oftentimes that's what happens too, when you hear about people who sell like their art for thousands of dollars, right? These are people with good connections somewhere. A lot of times that's what a lot of it is. It's who you know. It's not what you're producing. How many things end up at the top of a bestseller list that when you read them, they're absolute, it's literally some hack has just torn it off just to make money. And put in like every kind of trope and every kind of whatever. And yet the person who's really been thoughtful and carefully crafted something never gets sales because it's too literary, or it's too, some of the finest works, even if they get good reviews, don't necessarily sell. And it was also pointed out at one point, I used to belong to this literary group, and they said even if you were a New York Times bestselling author, so what does that mean? Like, okay, you might make, a New York Times bestselling author might make $30,000 in a year. Okay, $30,000, think about that. In this day and age, that's not enough to live on. That's barely enough to live on, So, it doesn't, you have your exceptions like J.K. Rowling, who the Harry Potter thing is now like she was able to buy a freaking castle or whatever. But that's again, or Stephen King up in Maine. That's a very rare thing to have somebody who is so well prolific and so has something that people latch onto. But things get latched onto and they're made into franchises. They're made into movies. They're made into all this different stuff. A lot of us, I think, are hoping that would happen with our work, but it doesn't necessarily. And that's a whole separate topic. But which is why it's always best. It's the best creative works are the ones that are done for their own sake, and they're done. And initially, like I said, what comes out initially has to be what's from the heart. Later on, it can be crafted into whatever form you think is appropriate. But but it is more about the journey, because part of creating is allowing the heart to express itself. Okay, so back to our reading. We have the adventure card. Okay, so again, this is all energy about going on this adventure. It keeps coming up. And the inner feeling of which we're unaware, play. And that was what Joanna was saying too. She says, creativity is play. It's allowing yourself to experiment with ideas without necessarily assuming that the experiment will even come to anything that you want. But it's the process of playing that is important here. Okay? So, and that's an important thing to understand. A lot of times we feel like we're under the gun, but remember, we're not all like writers for late night TV or whatever. We don't have some kind of a pressure deadline that we have to write and produce something or whatever form your creativity takes. You're just in it, you're in the moment, and you allow it to flow through you. You do it. Yeah, and so we have experiencing. That's what we have here, right? This is the woman. This shows a woman hugging a tree. It's a little hard to see in this image, but it's the idea that you are doing it for, you are playing for you're having the experience. It's not so much about the outcome. Okay. Now this is interesting because it's telling you that the advice here is to listen to the inner voice. Okay. This is the priestess card again. And that's what I had said about that which is kind of unmanifest and mysterious, but it flows through you. Creativity really is a mystery. It's really a mystery. It's like, how does this happen? How do we get into a space where we're able to create something? And it's kind of almost like you could call it almost a divine mystery. It's something that comes out of us that we're able to express. And there's like a real wonder to that, that there is. So in other words, it's about being quiet and listening to what's in that space. So initially, there could be a passivity to it. It's not like I'm going to try to do this. At some point, if we have ideas kicking around and we don't do anything with them, at some point you've got to translate that passivity to action. But here's an interesting outcome. It's the King of Cups in this one, and it is the healing card. Okay? So, and if you notice, this is the Anahata chakra. This is the heart chakra. So this is about healing. So when I think Sudha had asked about creating in terms of an outcome, one of the things that happens in the process of creating is healing. Okay, this is why sometimes you have certain therapies that are you have music therapy, you have drawing therapy, you have writing therapy. Art can be a type of therapy. It helps us. I think if a lot of us who are working on the heart opening, creativity is often a very safe way to manage that, because if you, let's just say you're somebody who maintains a lot of rage over something, maybe maybe years of suppression or something, it's certainly better to write that in a story or put it in a painting, or even write music, than it is to go out and a cathartic release, right? That's from the Aristotelian idea of catharsis. Yeah, the idea that you have this experience, and it's almost like you're allowing this to, you're using art as a kind of release. So it's talking about that angle of it as well. And I feel like for a lot of people, I think part of the reason people are encouraged in their voice is because they need to have a release. We've been pent up and we've been kind of held back from being the people that we are. And and now is a time to open up and to release that, to see who that person is. And you know what? There could be some things in there that maybe people think are uncomfortable or unpleasant, but that's part of the process. It's just, that's something that we can't take personally. We have to recognize that, and we don't, what we want to be careful of is you don't want to tell people that they're not allowed to express certain things, because sometimes you have to. And interesting how trauma blocks the throat chakra. Yeah, exactly. It does that because because then it's kind of like you shut your voice down. The example I always think of with this is when somebody, okay, I'll just use my own failed marriage as an example. But when I was married, when we were dating and stuff, everything was fine. We were able to talk about stuff and everything. But once there was any kind of an issue that we had to talk about, and if I wanted to talk to him about how I felt, he just literally would shut down. He'd be like, I don't want to hear it. And he'd just walk out of the room and slam the door. And that ends the conversation. And if you bring it up again, it's, I said I don't want to hear that. So in other words, what I have to say, he doesn't want to hear. So what do you do to keep the peace? You stop talking. You go, okay, fine. Or it's like if you keep trying to talk to somebody and they don't want to have a conversation with you about it. Or you feel like people are just pushing back, like, no, I don't care what you have to say. Don't talk to me. Then you're just like, okay. And so after a while, what a lot of people do is they just become resentful, and then they just grow quiet, or they find somebody else to talk to. They talk to their friends. Oof, yeah. That's a thing that happens. And it happens a lot. It happens a lot. I hear about it a lot. I mean, I'm just talking about my own marriage, but there's others that happens as well. I mean, it's not a unique experience from what I've heard. And that's, damn, yeah. It's not a unique experience. And so, yeah. So after a while, you just become resentful of that person. And then it becomes, that was my experience in my failed union. Yeah. And that happens a lot. And a lot of times, this too is also why I feel like the masculine needs to learn how to connect with the feminine. Because the part of the problem is that they don't. A lot of men don't know how to connect with that. Because the only emotions, they're not allowed to express emotions. Expressing emotions is too girly, right? And doing certain things, I don't know, you don't want to be seen as like feminine or, all the words that people have that go along with that. So the only emotion they're allowed to express is like kind of anger, or, tough guy kind of stuff. That's the only thing they're allowed to express. So if you come and say, listen, I want to talk about my feelings, they're like, what about you and your feelings? Just suck it up, toughen up, I've been thinking about the masculine and feminine connection since you said it the other day. Oh, okay, this is Suda. Yeah, it's, yeah, and that's the thing, that we have this idea that we're supposed to keep a stiff upper lip, and that, that the person who is really grounded and sensible and collected is the one who doesn't show emotion. So anytime you have feelings that you want to get out or need to talk about, it's almost like, oh, well, you're just being whiny and dramatic and weak and, I mean, to be fair, there are people who can create drama, but generally speaking, just wanting to express your feelings is not making drama. It's just, you want to talk about how you feel. And I think sometimes men have that worse than women, but when people get into a relationship, you might something, again, I don't want to say all men aren't listeners, because, there's some people I know who have great relationships where they talk to their spouse, and their spouse, is able to interact with them in a way that's helpful, and that's awesome. I mean, that's the way you want it to be. But a lot of times it's just like, if it's something unpleasant, especially if it's something unpleasant about an interaction, like they do something that hurts you and you want to say, look, you did this thing and it hurt me. sometimes they're just like, F you, like, and there's and so what do you do with that? That's the end of the conversation. There's no discussion without creating an explosion. So a lot of times, to avoid the explosion, it was like I've used this expression before. It was like this idea of sometimes women give up relationship to be in a relationship, is the way it was expressed. And it was in a book, and gosh, I wish I could remember what book this was. It was an interview with somebody, but it was women give up relationship to be in a relationship. And that's a lot of that is one of the places where the suppression of voice. Now, it doesn't just have to come through marriage, because not everybody gets married. It could be through dating. It could be through, it could also be through like family stuff too. You could have family situations where it's like, we don't talk about that. I mean, I grew up with that as well. There were just certain things that we don't ever, like literally if you start to talk about it, my mom would be like, immediately, like, stop, no, we don't talk about that. And my mother would always handle things when she would get angry. Instead of talking to you, she would just glare at you and give you the silent treatment. I mean, she'd absolutely make you feel it, until it was like, even if she did something wrong, you had to beg her for forgiveness. So that's a technique sometimes that people use as well. Because in other words, they try to make you come to them and like beg them for something. All of these things suppress voice. Okay? And all of us have, that's just not an okay state of things. So I feel like now creativity is coming up, because it's like, we need to express our voice in whatever way that makes sense for us. And I think that's why some people feel like, no, I need to write. And again, in the end, in the final analysis, you could take the product and say, same with your mother. Yeah, right. The whole thing of, come down off the mountain, folks. Yeah, exactly. It's, there's this sense that, okay, even in academia, I think that's why some people are shy of academia, because they feel like somebody's going to put their ideas down as stupid or uninformed or whatever, or they're going to be condescended to or not really listened to. There's a whole lot of this, and there's a lot of ways in which voice is suppressed, but it's part of a culture that is split. Part of a culture that tells us that the world is corrupt, like a biblical worldview that says that things are corrupt, and that says that we need to be kind of ashamed of who we are as human beings because we're inherently sinful. You can go back to that, and that's why this is a mythology that needs to change. This is not a mythology of sinfulness. You're not sinful. I mean, I'm so sick of that term. And I know there's people who espouse Christianity and very much, and I understand people are acceding to the idea that everybody has faults. Yeah, everybody has faults. So what? I mean, if you think about, this will be the last thing I say because I'm running way over time today, but if you think about porcelain makers, okay? One of the things that I remember reading in this book on porcelain, and it was, I forget the guy's name. He's, I think he has a Scandinavian name, but he's written a couple of books that are really interesting that are just kind of on these very specific subjects. And one of the things is that when porcelain is made and it breaks, the cracks are often filled in with gold. That they use gold to kind of repair it, like little, liquid gold to repair it. So it's almost like the wounds or the flaws in and of themselves become something golden. They become part of the art. So, something to think about. And oftentimes our art at least starts from that place of wounding, where we talk about what it means to be experienced. Yes, Japanese. Mm-hmm. And where it starts to be that kind of exploration of it. So that's just it. So, I guess in the final analysis, it's like, don't worry, this is something that passes through you like everything else. Creativity is something, if you allow it to come through you, it kind of helps clear some of that out. It helps, it's a way of clearing things out through art, whatever that ends up being. Okay. And again, creativity doesn't always have to just be about art per se. Like I said, it can be making a garden, tending a garden. I mean, we all create in some way. So Rouhani has helped with the heart opening. Yes, and thank you for saying that. Yes, and Rouhani does. Because Rouhani often will show you, people who have Rouhani sessions, oftentimes the first session is a very, very joyful one. But also people sometimes will just suddenly, it'll be like they'll have visions in front of their face of exactly what the thing is, at least the first thing that's kind of blocking them. And then it's kind of like there's this process of going through it where you kind of feel it and then it transmutes itself, and you feel it and it transmutes itself. So yeah, so Rouhani is very, very good for that as well. So anyway, 7:55. So we've been on for almost an hour, so I had better get going. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I will see some of you tonight. I'm very excited for the starting of the ISFM, and I will have more today about people who just want to deal with lectures. Good luck with the solar eclipse and with all the other stuff coming up this month. And yes, oh, you're welcome. And yeah, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning. So, oh, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, so have a great rest of your day. Take care.